Fantastic. Let's make sure we're live.
Well, hey, gang.
You'll grab the door?
Yeah, I'll grab the door. That'll be a good idea. So we're live again.
Again, finally. Short hiatus, but frankly, we earned it. It was a good first week.
It was not a bad week.
No.
Hey, if you're joining us, this is Dan Kurylo.
Todd Waller.
I'm Todd Waller. This is the Studio Spaces, a semi-regular live video here on Facebook.
Increasingly regular.
Increasingly regular. I absolutely love that. The aim here, just FYI, is not to take up your Facebook stream, is not to take up your morning, such as we may actually show up. It really is to kind of add value to the real estate space in and around Southeast Michigan with a kind of sort of focus here on the Ann Arbor area for sure.
And you don't have to watch it on Thursday mornings.
Nope.
I mean, that's great. You want to help our ratings? By all means, please. But these are going to be going up back on Facebook. They're going to be going up on our YouTube page.
Yep.
YouTube, you can search Studio 48. Subscribe. So once we get to 100 subscribers, we can get a URL.
We could probably put links in the comments.
We should put links.
We should probably put links in the comments.
There will be links in the comments.
So just look down.
We're making a lot of promises today. We'd like to deliver on a lot of those.
I think we'll have the ability to do that.
The first promise we want to deliver on from the last one, we figured out landscape mode.
Woo!
Actually, we didn't.
No, we did not.
Thank you, Dan Rose.
Friend of the show, Dan Rose.
Friend of the show. You're the reason that this looks infinitely better.
Thank you very much, Dan, for that. We greatly appreciate your assistance on that. We're clearly not FB masters.
No, and the reason for that is we are real estate masters. And that's also the reason we have not been on the air for 2 weeks now.
2 weeks, yeah, it's been too long.
It's been a busy couple of weeks.
It's been a busy couple of weeks. If you are in the process of trying to buy a house, you know what it's like here in Southeast Michigan and around the Ann Arbor marketplace. I'm sure this is true across many places across the U.S. as well. We just don't have a lot of inventory, and yet demand is steady to rising. So we're again seeing multiple offers come in on homes, and not just first-time buyer homes either. We're seeing multiple bids on almost luxury homes. They're high-end homes for sure, and that's kind of different than what we've seen. It's always been 400 and under, things kind of rock and roll. Now we're seeing stuff 6, 7, 8 just disappearing instantly.
Disappearing and above list.
And above list with multiple offers. It's fascinating. So the pitch, if you want to call it that, is if this is the right year, this might be the right time for you to consider putting your home on the marketplace.
Yeah, well, for a number of different reasons.
Right.
And so if you're looking to list your home, boy, there's a good chance you're gonna get some interest there.
Yep.
I had a home come across, not one of our listings, but I had a couple of my clients message me about it yesterday. Just one home, incredible interest just from my own clients. So if that tells you anything about what's going on right now, that's been fantastic. If you own a home and you're very happy with your home, but you're thinking about refinancing,
it might be a good time.
It might be a good time.
It
might be a very good time.
I think if you've been hiding under a rock, you may have missed that interest rates are at near historic, if not historic lows right now. And we're talking mortgage interest rates. So funny thing, Dan, I see the Fed cut their interest rates because of a response to the coronavirus that's been flying around there. Does the Fed open market rate impact 30-year fixed mortgages?
More than almost anything else. The federal funds rate, which the Fed has adjusted, directly impacts your mortgage rates. And so right now, if you're refinancing, if you're buying a home, I can't remember a time that rates have been this low.
So if you want to do the Wayback Machine, when we bought our first house.
All right.
When we bought our first house, my wife and I, we had 7.25% as our interest rate. And when we bought 3.5, 4 years ago now, our next house, we were at 3.5%. And right now, my lender friends are telling me, Todd, we're like right at 3, if not below 3 right now.
Yeah,
with 0 points for 30-year.
I think one of our associates here at Berkshire Hathaway saw a 299 come across.
Pete, that's just impressive. So let's talk about a little bit that relationship between the Fed open market rate and interest rates. There's not a direct correlation, but there is a strong correlation. So if you follow the timeline of what happened here, it was Monday or Tuesday this week that the Fed actually cut interest rates. And so they marked the open market rate down to, what was it, 1 point?
They marked it down to 1.25 from 1.75.
So they dropped it 50 basis points. The 30-year fixed rate and mortgage rates are usually based on...
You may notice that your mortgage rates were not 1.75%. If you've been following, we're not quite at a 1-to-1.
No, there has to be a little bit of a markup there. But the mortgage-backed securities, which is the secondary market, if you will, that drives the 30-year and the 15-year fixed mortgage rates, they had already adjusted for what they anticipated was coming. They were looking at unease in the marketplace, in the stock market, and saying, we kind of need to lower 30-year and 15-year fixed mortgages at that point in time. So when when the Fed dropped their interest rate to the 50 basis points, the mortgage market had already accounted for that. So you did not see then another drop in mortgage rates at that point in time. So they're tied, just not like 1-to-1. They move in tandem, plus or minus a couple of days.
There's some lag.
There's a little bit of lag there.
That doesn't mean that you should be waiting 6 months.
Nope.
If you're trying to get ahead of this.
Yeah, so again, if 2020 is the year for you to make a move, this might be the time to think about it. But that's our pitch.
Yeah, that's our pitch.
That's it. We're done.
That's our opinion.
We want to add value to the conversation here in the real estate space, and there's a little misunderstanding when the Fed does something with the market rate and how it directly affects mortgages. But you know what? It's good, and that's what we're here for too, to answer questions.
And if you want to know exactly what your rate's going to be, talk to a lender.
Boom.
There's no better way to know, and it kind of gets the ball rolling. You start looking at houses. Pre-approval is not an instant process.
No, it takes a little bit of time. And in fact, this kind of segues beautifully into the topic that we wanted to talk about today, which is contract to close. So, you're a buyer. Dan, you're working with a bunch of buyers.
I am.
Okay. So Dan and his clients are pretty smart. His clients are like, we want to buy a house. So what's the first thing that they do?
We go out and get pre-approval.
They go out and get pre-approved.
Several weeks ahead of time. Like you want to be prepared.
Yeah.
Because like I mentioned, that home that came across yesterday, that's probably not going to last into the weekend.
No.
It's going to be a more or less instant sell.
It will be.
And if you see that on Zillow and you call your realtor, and takes a couple days for pre-approval, you're not getting the house. It's not going to happen.
And we've got some personal recent experiences where things just were delayed in getting a pre-approval squared away. And I will tell you, as a purchaser,
and it lost the purchase of the house.
Yeah. As a purchaser, if you're in the marketplace and you're staring at a house saying, I really like that home, chances are really good there's at least one other party out there doing the same thing.
You're not the only one that likes that home.
Exactly.
A nice home's a nice home.
A nice home is a nice home. So you're thinking about buying, you talk with the lender, you get your pre-approval, you find the right house, you write the offer, it goes under contract, buyer and seller agree to terms. Now we're in that moonlight phase, from contract to close, we call it. You've got an agreed upon purchase agreement and you're marching towards the closing table. In real estate lingo, the closing table is when cash or checks and keys kind of pass each other at the table. It's where you as a purchaser get the keys to the home and you as the seller. Well, sometimes. There's always a caveat here. And then you as a seller get the proceeds from the sale of your property. So how do we go? What's the timing from contract to close? Where do we go?
Well, timing is depending on what your financing situation is. And
right.
Let's say you didn't need to go get that pre-approval. You saw a beautiful home and you had $400,000 in cash burning a hole in your pocket. You could probably be in that house in what, 2.5, 3 weeks?
About 2 weeks on the short side, probably.
Yeah.
So there's some things that need to be lined up, right? So if you've got a cash purchase, if you're bringing cash to purchase your property, then you're going to want to get your inspection done. You want to eyeball the property. You want an inspector to come through and tell you, hey, this is what's good, this is what's bad, heads up on this. And then if there's anything that comes out of that inspection that's most egregious to you, then you talk with the seller and say, hey, look, we still want to purchase the property, but these issues were not counted for when we made our offer. Let's figure out how to settle this.
And that is, of course, true as well for financed properties.
Absolutely.
You want an inspection. You want to know what's going on with that house.
Absolutely.
And I think it's not too far to say that whether or not something egregious comes up, if you're not finding a big old hole in the roof, it's still good to know what's going on with that house, what the story of that house is.
Absolutely.
And, you can't always find that any other way.
So the seller's disclosure will tell you things like the age of the roof, potentially the age of the furnace. Those are items that if it's not a brand new furnace or a brand new roof, you want to know how long am I going to have to budget to replace the roof or potentially replace the furnace. Those are the kinds of items that you're going to talk through. So walking that cash transaction through, you want to get that inspection squared away. Once that's settled, really the time lag at that point is the title work being put together. So theoretically, if you're moving really fast, you could probably close in about a week, but call it 2 weeks so you're not rushing around and
you're not driving your title company crazy.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
Now, finance transactions have a couple of more, I don't want to call them roadblocks. They've got like speed bumps on the way to closing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Think of like a very secure federal building. Like when you're leaving, there are those concrete pillars that can rise up, and most of the time it's just a little bump. But sometimes you're not going anywhere.
Exactly.
It's just not going to happen.
So
biggest one there, I think.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Appraisal.
So same thing applies, right? You get the house under contract. You still have the inspection. Probably talking at most 10 days to get your inspection done and report back to the seller on issues that you found. But then as Dan just pointed out, the next largest speed bump on the way to closing for a finance transaction is going to be that financing contingency.
And I do want to point something out there as well. That flow is important. You want to do your inspection before you do your appraisal.
Absolutely.
And so let's say there was a cannonball that went through the roof 10 years ago and nobody brought it up. You find the hole. It's a problem. It's clearly a problem. You need a new roof. And
cannonball goes through the roof. Hold on a second. That's just bananas. I love it.
Yeah, did that just catch up for you?
Yeah.
And you need a new roof. Seller doesn't want to budge anywhere. You can't really swing the cost of a new roof at this point. Maybe you don't want to go through with that house anymore. That's a fair place to be, and that's not uncommon.
And that contingency, the inspection contingency, that issue right there, if buyer and seller can't come to terms on that, as long as you're within the timeline for that specific contingency,
no harm, no foul.
Exactly. You have the ability as purchaser to step away from the transaction and not incur any more costs. Some people may fight you on it, but at the end of the day, they don't really have a leg to stand on because the terms of the contract are the terms of the contract. As long as you adhere to those terms, you're good.
But now let's say you did your appraisal first. Your lender came to you day one. It's like, hey, we can get somebody in there tomorrow. We can get rolling here.
I can name lenders that do that.
And there's
I'm not going to do that now.
No, yeah. Come back next week for Studio Space where we burn bridges. No, so if you have done your appraisal first and then you decide to back out on the house, you're out that cost of an appraisal.
Right.
For no net benefit to you, really whatsoever.
Correct. So the cost of an inspection is going to be what, $400, $500, $600, depending on how big the house is and what kind of inspections you're having done.
If you're doing radon, if you're doing sewer, those are going to add.
Yep. And then your appraisal is going to be a few $100s as well. You're pushing $400 to $500 for the appraisal as well. So if your flow is appraisal first, then inspection, and you walk away because of the inspection, theoretically you're out about $1,000 on a home that you're just not going to go after. I like to look at the inspection, and I tell my purchasers the inspection really is kind of like an insurance on the health and safety of the home itself. And if we pass that, then we go ahead and pull the trigger on getting the appraisal squared away. So we've done our inspection. We're squared away in 10 days after getting the contract signed. As soon as we're done with the inspection and we've cleared that, we turn back to the lender and say, that appraisal needs to be done ASAP. Typically, the appraiser is just kind of on hold, on pause at that point, and typically the appraiser comes out within a couple of days of giving the go sign. So the appraisal happens, and now we're tied up into the financing contingency.
Well, I do want to make a note on appraisal as well. Sometimes the appraisal doesn't happen. We don't see it a lot, but it does happen. If you're in a neighborhood with a lot of uniform homes, with a high sales volume, that you've got a lot of good data on, the lender has a lot of good data to go on, and your price falls within a certain range, which we don't know what that range is going to be, they may waive the appraisal. It happens. We've seen it recently.
It does, and it started happening, and fun historical fact, when we started coming out of the crunch, so when the housing recession itself was starting to right itself, and we were plateauing and starting to increase in value, this would have been like 2012 or so, I had a lender actually come to me and say, hey, there's an appraisal waiver. We have enough data in the area. We're good on this sales price. They had to pick me up off the floor. I was floored that they had something like that already. It was amazing.
That's a great situation to be in. And not only does it save you money, it saves time. It saves a little bit of hassle on everybody's part. Not something to bank on, though.
Not something to bank on. So the other thing, too, sometimes there's what's the right word? Sometimes there is a mix-up or misunderstanding of an inspection and an appraisal. I've actually had some folks tell me that their FHA appraisal will serve as their inspection. Now, if you're following along and you're in real estate, you saw the back of my head kind of pop open because what? No, that's not the same thing. So for consumers out there, your appraisal is not the same thing as an inspection. I don't care if it's a VA appraisal or an FHA appraisal, and we can get into those weeds later.
Those are a little bit more detailed.
But they're not inspections.
Appraisals.
Yeah, they're not inspections. So, two different things. Inspection, health and safety of the home itself. Appraisal truly is an opinion of the value of the property. And the opinion of the value of the property is for the benefit of your lender, your bank. The bank wants to know, hey, if we give Joe Smith this mortgage, can we get that money out of that house? That's what the appraisal is there for. So, okay, so we've beaten the appraisal horse.
Yeah.
All right. The appraisal's ordered. The person comes out, spends 20, 30 minutes going through the house, takes pictures, measurements, walks away. The appraiser does their thing. Their thing is do some research, put it all together, and then the appraisal report comes back. We're going to assume,
What happens if that report is above what the house sold for, and what happens if the price of the house is above what the appraisal is for?
Great scenarios. In general, what I found is appraisers will hit target. So if your sales price on the contract is $200,000, typically an appraiser's coming in right at, just a little above or right at that $200,000 sales price, regardless of where the actual value of that home is. Every now and again, we see something come in drastically over sales price. So if you have a $200,000 house and your appraisal comes back at, say, $210,000 or $215,000, guess what, Mr. or Mrs. Lucky Buyer?
You still get a mortgage.
You still get a mortgage, and you're walking into a house with positive equity.
Ooh.
So you bought a $215,000 house for $200,000. That's actually pretty good. We don't see a lot of that right now. So don't set your sights on something like that happening.
Yeah, like we said earlier, market is booming for sellers right now.
Yep.
And things are going for generally above what they're listed at.
Exactly.
And sometimes, not infrequently, above what they're worth.
Right.
I think we're both thinking of the same property at the moment.
We are thinking about the same property at the moment. This is a fun time in real estate, I'm not going to lie. So the other option here outside of coming in at value or above value is coming in below value. If an appraisal comes in below the sales price, what does that mean?
Well, it means you still get a mortgage. It just doesn't cover all of it.
Yeah.
So let's say you paid $215,000, or you went under contract at $215,000 on a house that appraised at $200,000. Your lender, more than happy to get you a mortgage for that $200,000.
Yeah.
Those $15,000, you're going to need to write a check.
Yep.
That's on you at this point.
So we haven't seen that scenario often in today's market. We do see it periodically, and there are ways in which those contracts are negotiated to make stuff like that happen. Again, we're thinking of a similar property where list price was here, sales price was way up there, the appraisal wasn't going to come in up there, and the buyer just brought a whole bunch of cash to the table to make up the difference. When the market was much softer and we had lower than sales price appraisals coming in, typically what would happen is buyer and seller would then renegotiate the sales price. Buyer, of course, is like, well, it's only worth X, and the seller is like, but you offered Y. And so sometimes we would come to a number in between where the buyer would bring a little bit of money to the table and the seller would come down in the sales price a little bit. Sometimes the purchaser doesn't have the cash on hand to do that, and the seller's unwilling to drop to that sales price. That's when the contract kind of falls apart. Again,
but there is always a calculus there.
There is.
You're under contract. You've got an investment in this home.
Yep.
You need to sell your house. Maybe you're contingent on the house selling to get into your next home.
Yep.
Maybe it's worth it to drop the sales price a little bit to move things along if the seller or if the purchaser is not able to.
And so, as you can see, there's a lot of, if you will, rabbit trails on each decision point. So the decision tree on walking through a contract, from contract to close, to purchase a home, there's a lot of decision points along the way where if yes, then you go this way. If no, then you go that way. If maybe, then you've got these decisions in front of you that you need to make. So there's a lot of stuff that kind of gets crammed into a short time frame. And we're not talking of months and months here of a time frame either. Contract to close averages right now are between 30 and 45 days. So literally, you write a contract today, in about a month, you could be getting the keys to your new home, or you could be getting cash from the sale of your old home, whichever way you are, whichever side of the transaction you're on at that point. So the appraisal comes back.
They will take longer.
And one of the things that, for me as a realtor, has made me scratch my head very, very frequently is this thing called underwriting, specifically underwriting when it comes to a loan. So you talk with loan officers, you talk with mortgage brokers, and they'll do a great job up front of grabbing all this information about your credit worthiness, your ability to repay a loan. Once the appraisal comes back, now they know the value of the property that they're getting ready to give you a mortgage upon. But now all of that information goes into this thing called underwriting. I call it a black box because I don't know what the heck is going on back there. I've watched this for a period of time. Some things make sense, some things don't make sense. I've seen transactions just continually get red flags thrown on them by the underwriter because the purchaser needed to update their W-2s or they needed to update their tax return, something along those lines. And then I've also seen flags get tossed out there when they don't like the look of an appraisal, for example, and we have to do some legwork on that to assuage the underwriter at that point in time. So I call it a black box because all the information goes in and typically an approval comes out, typically. Sometimes it takes a little bit of back and forth with the underwriter to get things exactly the way that they like it. So,
and the underwriter in that process is generally calling the shots, so to speak.
Pretty much.
They are making the decision on whether or not you get approval to buy this home.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so it can be frustrating. So just know that once you get that appraisal back, and then the lender has the appraisal in hand and everything is good on that side, the value, everything goes into the underwriter. Now it's the black box, and we kind of sit there and we almost literally just twiddle our thumbs for a little bit. Like if the underwriter doesn't throw any flags and we don't have to do any work, great. Week and a half for them to check all their boxes, make sure everything is good. And then they take those lending docs and they throw them over to the title company here in the state of Michigan, because we do our closings at the title company. And the title work should already have been in process, but now the title work is put together with the financing documents for that great closing day. So the title work, you've heard of title insurance. Title insurance is mandatory if you are financing, on the buy side, is mandatory if you are financing your purchase. Lenders require title insurance. What's the purpose of title insurance?
Well, it's to make sure that your title is free and clear. And what that means is that you're buying the house that you're buying.
Yep.
That you have the right to that house. Let's say a sale wasn't recorded a little while back, and that person comes back and says you sold a house, somebody in the process sold a house that wasn't theirs, and now they're selling it to you, and they have a legal claim to that house. If you don't have title insurance, you're kind of SOL. But
yeah,
if you do have title insurance, there's some protection there for you. And that's why lenders want title insurance involved so much.
The title insurance solves two problems. Number one, the authority of the seller to sell. And when it comes to the financing your purchase, it assuages the bank that not only can the seller sell, but you can own that property free and clear. So there are no clouds on the title. Clouds on the title would be things like liens or judgments against that are being held against the property. Because
those are a little more common than a mystery owner.
Yeah. Mystery owner doesn't happen very frequently. Maybe that's somebody who's owned a property for like 80 years or something along those lines. But title insurance really is insurance for your lender to know you have the ability to own the property unencumbered. There's nobody else that can lay claim to that property. And it also serves as notice that the seller has the authority to sell that property to whomever they come to an agreement with.
And not just for the lender. It's generally a good idea for you to have title insurance on a cash purchase if you're going in and buying a house, because those same confidences that the lender want, that they own the house and that it can be sold and owned by everyone involved in the process. You should want that for yourself too. If you're buying a house, you want to make sure that you own that house. You can own that house.
You don't want to drop $400,000 on a house cash and then realize 2, 3, 4 months later somebody else owns it, because without title insurance, not only are you uncovered or uninsured there, but that person can lay claim to it and through a lengthy court process take that property back, and you'll be out the $400,000 plus legal fees to fight everything at that stage of the game. So yeah, it's probably a good idea to get title insurance.
Title insurance, it's very similar to the appraisal in that way.
Yep.
The lender wants to know what they're stepping into.
Exactly. Well, I think, did we miss anything on contract to close?
I don't think so.
Wait, we did. We missed one thing. There's one very important thing on contract to close, the day of closing. Man, I'm telling you, real estate is not stress-free. I don't care if you're a buyer or a seller. I don't care if you're doing this with cash or you're financing it.
Still one of the biggest purchases of your life.
Oh my goodness, and one of the most stressful times in folks' lives. So when you get to closing, I just had a very fun closing day last Friday, about a week ago. And both of the transactions that were closing on that particular day were an absolute riot. Why? Because both parties, buyers and sellers in both instances, wanted that to happen. And we just had a blast at the closing table. So buyers and sellers were kibitzing and going back and forth, laughing about how they're going to be, how the buyers are going to use the new home, and the sellers were saying, "Oh, that's great. Make sure you talk with so and so down the road in the neighborhood. They're great folks." So when you get to the closing table, man, see it as a celebration. Yeah, you know what? If you're a buyer, you're going to sign a stack of docs that's like that thick. Okay, maybe that's an exaggeration,
well,
but it's thick.
Yeah.
But, get your hand nice and strong, get ready to sign a lot. But, man, celebrate the fact that you've just gone through a 30 to 45 day contract period, and who knows how long your search has gone at that point. If you're sellers, man, congratulate yourself that you got to the closing table and you got there as swiftly and as smoothly as possible. That's excellent. Now you get to walk away from the table without that home, and here's hoping with a nice fat check to put into your bank account and go towards your next home, go towards some investment, maybe fund a college fund. I don't know, but celebrate.
But you have a nice fat check.
And celebrate the moment.
Yeah, when this all happens right, everybody walks away happy,
grinning.
That's
yeah.
You sold a house, they bought a house, everybody it appraised.
Yep.
Title work came back clear. It's all good.
All the variables lined up for you.
Money came in at like 3%, and literally everyone in this process can be happy.
It is very true. So, I think we're done.
I think we're about done.
Thank
you all again for joining us. You should be able to join us again next Thursday. Again, check your local listings. Terms and conditions may apply. But it's once again, I'm Dan Kurylo.
I'm Todd Waller,
part of Studio 48 here at Berkshire Hathaway Home Service. And join us next week for Waller Watch, where we check the progress of Todd's eye. Hopefully he'll make it through the weekend all right down in Nashville.
Well, that's right. We've got Nashville. Yeah, convention. So, yeah, we may have to do a live remote in between here in next week.
It'd be a lot of fun. Get the rest of the team in on it.
I think that'd be the idea.
Cool. We're trying to loop the rest of the team in eventually as well.
We'll get Sarah and Jeffrey involved here. No question about it. We need to make that happen.
And now that we're in landscape mode, there's so much more room for them. Let's be honest. Dan Rose, we could not do this without you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And on that note, we'll see you next week.